Hi everyone, I am Joy Rosa with Earthworks Acupuncture, and we're here today with special guest Alyzza, a Southern organizer who's contributed their time and energy to the Greensboro Mural Project, Cackalack Thunder, and several other grassroots organizations, and is now with us today to talk about grounding in mutual aid via the virtual tip jar. Welcome, Alyzza. Oh, I think we're at mute again.
Oh,
There we go. Yep, now it's back.
okay, cool. Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Can you tell us your uh, name, preferred pronouns, and where you're from, located like globally and regionally?
So my name is Alyzza. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. Currently residing on unceded Occaneechi, Cheraw, and Tuscarora territories in Greensboro, North Carolina. Though I do hail from the eastern woodland and the former whaling capital of the world, New Bedford, Massachusetts. Yeah.
Great. And how many years as an organizer, like if you identify as an organizer, would you
Yeah,
say?
this is always one of those funny questions because I feel like it's only been in the past several years actually that I've come to self-identify that way or like embraced receiving and being referred to by that term. Though like when I sit and think about it, it's like, it's March 24th today, and just a couple days ago I had seen a post that was like it's been 17 years since the invasion of Iraq, and I'm like, because that was the first protest that I organized was then. So it's like I've been organizing things in some capacity for almost 20 years now, which
Right.
is also wild.
Yeah. And now your passion projects, what you're working on in relation to the hit of COVID-19. Can you talk?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was actually, so I wasn't working on anything before um, COVID, showed up. And, um, but then, this is a time of lots of unprecedented emergence. Um, and I think also it is a time that is offering us opportunity and access to a lot of creativity. And so I think it was about a week ago, I created um, the Greensboro virtual tip jar, and then like I saw one for DC being posted, and I was like, "Oh, DC, we love throwing alcohol on ourselves every Sunday." And I was like, "Oh, that's going to be really helpful for them, like huge like industry in that regard." But then specifically, I was like, "Oh, that's like also something that is needed here." And I had been in conversation with a friend earlier the very same day that I saw that, because at that point in time there was already like GoFundMe's being created and like virtual fund pools and like applications out there. Um, and so I had seen one that was for people who were either LGBTQIA plus or BIPOC. Um, and it was a GoFundMe, there's an application, and so I was sending around to people because I was like, we're all gonna be fucking hit. Um, and one of my friends was like, thank you so much. Like, I woke up this morning with $1 in my account. And, it's like,
That's real.
yeah. And it's like so much of this, I think what this is highlighting is just like, there's already been mass systemic inequality. And so then it's just like highlighting that level of sickness. And so that was the impetus. And also because it's like, I also am a food service or was a food service person in the past, like 3.5 months, and my job's now gone too. So it's like, this is going to affect me. It's going to affect lots of us, like, and none of us, or very few of us anyway, in Greensboro are making a living wage. The minimum wage here is $7.25. And so most people are making somewhere in that, like from $7.25 to maybe $12 if they're lucky, who are within this low range area. And so I specifically expanded it not just to be like restaurant and bar and club workers, but to include them, but like to have it be like more broader, like low wage workers.
Awesome. Yeah, so if you could kind of go into a little bit more about what the virtual tip jar actually is, like how does it function, who can put money in or take money out? Like how does it actually operate?
Mm-hmm. So, it's been a week now, and at first it was like, I'm just creating this Google Doc, let it go live. And I personally feel no ownership over it, but I do feel a stewardship of it. And I do feel that I am right now the only person like that's like very actively stewarding it, though there's a few other people who have reached out that are like really into it and like even want to do some kind of canvassing, but like what does that look like when we're supposed to be socially distancing? And so if we're able to even just like have like English and Spanish like flyers that we can like drop off in mailboxes or whatever the case is, because originally the structure was just like anyone who had access to the link. So there is one barrier, which is access to the internet. So anyone who has access to the link can edit the document and put themselves in, listing like where they were working, their name if they want, and then having their CashApp, Venmo, and or PayPal handles like on all three. And then if there's like any other needs or asks or whatever, they can include that. And then I also had a tab for offerings from the community that are like separate from money. And again, like I made it just to be like, let me just put this out here. But at this point in time, there's this, again, with the stewarding, it's like, I also don't want people to like be putting their information in and then not getting anything. Like I don't want to create any kind of false hope. And so, one thing that I've done today actually was I've now since created a Cash App and a email and a PayPal for that specifically. So if people want to put it into like donate directly to that or donate a larger amount to that then can like be distributed amongst everybody, and just to also guarantee that everyone's getting funds. That's something that is also like being expanded, just because there's also like the fact that there's like certain restaurants are more popular, like the Green Bean, for example, a local coffee shop here, their entire staff got laid off without warning. And also that's like that's a major like economic hub within Greensboro. So it's like someone who's working there as opposed to someone who's working at like Chez Janice, like is more likely to attract more tips. So just also thinking about the ways to like distribute it amongst like a wide variety of people. Or like, I know there's like some workers at Chili's also that like are trying to get involved. And it's like, that is also like just much different than like the Green Bean, but also simultaneously with like local coffee shops and things, like they employ a lot of queer and trans people. So there's like a lot of dynamics that are at play in terms of like access and need. And regardless, it's like people are going to need capital to survive right now, because there's so many costs that exist. Like it costs to fucking live, and that is the failings of capitalism.
And so capitalism, when we're talking also about the integration of self-care, while grounding in this work, what or how have self-care and healing arts encouraged or supported your work as an organizer? I had like the Greensboro Mural Project, and I'm out here in Portland, Oregon, so we're seeing that in a larger way, but I think it's important for smaller cities like Greensboro to understand and hear how this is supporting you as an organizer.
Yeah, it's really interesting just because by almost accident, I feel like I've fallen into the realm of cultural organizer. Like that was never my intention. I didn't know that it existed. Like it was just like, oh, I guess that's actually what I'm doing. Like with the mural project, when we started it, a big part of that was, and it definitely frames a lot of the organizing that I've done since, but a big part of why Kat Scalati and I started it was centered around the ability to say yes, because so much of the organizing work that we had done to that point in time and that we see other people doing, it's based around a no, and even just like the energy of no, as opposed to like actually like an enthusiastic
Oh,
yes.
yes, yes.
Yeah, it's like when thinking about like enthusiastic consent also, and not always having to like be resisting and like be reactive. And it's like, no, we want to be able to create like this world. And like our first mural was, I feel very appropriately, what would make Greensboro a healthy city. And it's like we got so many responses, including things like righting historical wrongs, but also living wages and insurance, good jobs. And so it's all things that like if we have in place, like the crisis moment that a lot of people are feeling could potentially be a lot like mitigated a lot more.
And that is in terms of also like self-care and how that fits into
Well, yeah, and so some of that is like being able, like just the yes, like yes is being able to say yes. It just like I feel like it does a lot more like within your body and like your nervous system, and like so much of right now is also like how our nervous systems are being cared for and how we're reacting. So whether it's like super panic, anxiety, like there's just a lot of fear that's going on, that's like in the atmosphere, and how that's like within our bodies. And so like knowing those things, and like then also knowing the ways that we can take care of ourselves as individuals and what we want to say yes to. And so like as an individual, it's like I'm saying yes to burning a lot of pine. Like that's what I've been doing like very consistently throughout my days, like since specifically like this has like become all the more impactful. But yeah, it's a wild time, and being able to take care of ourselves however that is, and part of that like through mutual aid, like being able to take care of myself is also like taking care of other people.
Can you talk a little bit about your first experience? Firstly, describe the oppressed, and then like a little bit about your experience at this participatory budgeting conference in New York, and kind of how that might be shaping what the virtual tip jar, was influenced by.
Yeah, so in 2012 or 13, somewhere around then, I was at it was the first international participatory budgeting conference in New York City. And one of the workshops that I went to was like, I don't even remember the title, but it was basically about like economics, the economy, participatory budgeting, and arts and theater. I don't remember the title. Anyway, we ended up doing Theater of the Oppressed, which I'd never heard of before, never experienced, and it changed my life. And as I was doing it that first time, I was like, oh, I need to do this more. Like, I need to know how to do this. I want to do this. And Theater of the Oppressed was created by Augusto Boal. And he was a contemporary of Paulo Freire, and so like their thinking definitely influences each other in their creations. Oh, look at that! Look at that! That's perfectly timed. You didn't set that up, did you? My goodness. And yeah, no, it was just like a really significant experience for me. And then from there, I went to Port Townsend, Washington, to go through a week-long Theater of the Oppressed Joker training, because the facilitators of TO are called jokers because we're like neutral, and are able to like move the space. I always was like, because we're fucking jokesters, and humor can neutralize things. Um, Indigenous humor for the win, always. And yeah, and from there I was able to connect with other people, and then it expanded, and we brought the training to the Southeast, in both Greensboro and Atlanta in 2015. And so that was also really great then to be able to like spread that skill. But so much of TO is centered in your body, and it was like for me a really big part of body awareness. And like Saturday was the last day that my job was like open, before we shut down indefinitely until the governor basically raises the restaurants being able to be dined in again. And when I came home, just like the level of like stress and tenseness and tightness that I was able to feel in my body was like really to a way that I hadn't experienced in a while, but being able to be so like body aware is something that I was able to access from TO. And that's like a really important seed for like that for me. And that like, you know, coming out of this, like it's all connected because it's like, it's fucking stressful to be a service worker or any other kind of worker, but I'll just speak from a service worker during a pandemic. Why is shit still open? It doesn't have to be. Our values of what has to be open and be essential.
And so
no logic. But yeah, so that's like a big, like a connector between Theater of the Oppressed and like my own personal experience, and just like that empathy of knowing that there's a lot of workers who aren't on our list. We have about 100 people represented right now, who are like still going in day out and experience this like this shit that, like this basically service workers are like embodying this, and like this is like gonna be like epigenetics like future down the road, like for like their children, their children's children, just like the way that like we hold trauma and pass it down. Like this is one of those moments that if we're not conscious of how we're actually engaging, like it'll like proliferate generationally.
Absolutely. And so this is part and parcel to how COVID-19 has affected your work as a grassroots organizer. I mean, personal, professional, and communal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, it's all those things. It's spiritual. It's so much.
Yes, please say more about the spiritual part too, because that's, I think, one of the ways in which we're, we can anchor in this kind of information, and like you said, like really break generational curses already, and that's what you're talking about in terms of like epigenetics. In people, trauma gets trapped and embodied in people experiencing traumatic events and things like pandemics. I know for me personally, as an Indigenous human, a lot has been brought up to the surface to be cleared, to be, channeled and healed accordingly. And so that's what we're really trying to do with this work and just connecting.
No, completely. I mean, and just thinking about like this year, like I've been thinking about this year actually for probably at least 4 years, because this year marks the 400th anniversary of the landing of the Mayflower in Patuxent, what is known as Plymouth now. And, it was like after like that landing was then what led, I mean, there was already like, it was about 2 years before that there was like a mass dying of Indigenous people in the Northeast due to like, disease from European settlers, but this was like highly concentrated. And I think the symbolic nature of like pilgrims and like Americana is like very particularly strong. And so it's like the fact that it's happening now is like not lost on me, and it's kind of great because there's been a bunch of the like 400 celebration stuff that's actually been canceled, and I'm like it's the little things. Yes. Yeah, but no, definitely like thinking about that, and just like pine also like is very explicitly like an Indigenous tactic, and it was like used to prevent scurvy back in the day. And so it's just like there's also a lot of like returning to knowledge that's also like there's so much greatness about right now, like as fuck shit as it is, there's a lot of greatness.
You can really kind of flip the paradigm to it. And sometimes I'm trying to be as discerning as I can, right? Because everybody is processing this at different rates. Everybody is, like having these evolutionary experiences at different rates. And so I'm for these and also cautious of when and how I post these. But somebody posted today 5 creative reframes in a time of COVID-19, right? So like shelter in place, they had suggested as artist in residence. Like I'm very, that's a good idea, but also I'm, like kind of waiting for that wave to kind of, fill in. Or like quarantine out of fear for self-protection might look like quarantine out of concern for collective well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Social distancing, physical distancing, isolation and loneliness, solitude and solidarity. Economic collapse versus ecological renewal. So those are kind of some things and ways that, we can start to talk about reframing. And in terms of reframing, were there any other ways that your community was pooling together resources? I guess on the document you were saying that some people were offering different things for the community, but in terms of like food access.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been, I know that there's one like fairly comprehensive document that's about food access in, I don't know if it's Greensboro or Guilford County at large. I think it's Greensboro specifically, and it also includes the link to the virtual tip jar, which is all of the food system is connected. Oh yeah, sorry, definitely just and so there's that. There's also been in Glenwood where I'm staying, and I know that it's also in other neighborhoods, but I'll speak specifically to here. There's a group of people that have been canvassing the neighborhood with like paper flyers and leaving them, that has information that it's like, if you need someone to go grocery shopping for you, if you need someone to get your medication, like especially if you're in any of the the more at-risk demographics, like people are willing to do those things for you. Just call these numbers or email this, and like we will coordinate those things for you. So that's really great. That's like a resident-driven thing here in the neighborhood. And I know that Interactive Resource Center is also bottom lining. They're selling T-shirts to raise funds for people in restaurants that have specific. It's like is hospitality workers is how they're framing it, and so it's restaurant workers specifically who are out of work, and so that's also great. And I think it's also a little limited. But yeah, no, it's there is a lot, and I think Greensboro like has whether or not it wants to admit it, like on a broader scale, like not just like in these like neighborhood pockets, like there is a pretty solid I feel like precedent and practice for mutual aid, and so it's happening in a lot of different ways, and that's also exciting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we were to make a collective list of demands for our cities, where would we begin? I'm looking at free healthcare, no work, no paying, no debt, free listeners.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the thing, like, because like Duke Energy, the water, like all of these different utilities are like, well, it's like a pause, and it's like that's just going to run people into debt.
Interest, yes, and run into debt.
I mean, like even without interest, like I don't know if that's part of it, but just like this is what your bill would have been. You have not been working. Now you need to pay it on top of like a double bill. But it's like double bills for everything also. So it's like that's kind of terrifying too. And so it's like I think that it's like there just should be a complete like use what you need, and those companies will like bite the bullet, because I mean it's like Duke Energy has already poisoned the state with like the Dan River, let alone like everything else. Yeah, and so it's just this is a time where companies, corporations, which are the entities in my opinion that have led to a lot of like the mass like climate change that we're experiencing, that in my opinion this is very much tied to, like they're the ones that need to be paying the cost of it, not the people.
Right. So I wanted to kind of leave and segue a little bit with an excerpt from Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and kind of also segue into, I know you don't want to say too much about your other passion project, but city planning and praxis is kind of in tandem with what we're talking about right now and creating anew. And so to encourage people, if you don't already have this book, rent it. Libraries, like there's different library sources, but Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire is an excellent place to start. Even if, I remember the first time that I read this and a lot of it had gone over my head, but there was still something that was sinking in, something that was telling me like, oh, this is very much, but I wanted to read an excerpt. Page 89, this is chapter 3. Because love is an act of courage, not fear. Love is commitment to others. No matter where the oppressed are found, the act of love is commitment to their cause, the cause of liberation. And this commitment, because it is loving, is dialogical. And I really loved that because when we're talking about reflection and action, right? Reflecting on what has happened, the action piece in what we're creating, not recreating, but this is something that it needs to be completely new because the old system didn't work. So this is a radical interaction that in every part of the word is a call to integrate, right? These interactions and to ground this kind of transformative nature that's being co-created with each passing day throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. And so one on-the-spot question, Alyzza. If you were going to recommend any books or documentaries other than this for people to read up on social solidarity or mutual aid or planning praxis, what would your recommendations be? And then I'll link that when I upload this.
So Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Brown. I would also recommend Alternative Urban Futures. That was a book that really, it got me into thinking about planning as a tactic and tool. And that was actually, it was through Van Jones had promoted it. Was like, hey, this is a great book. And I was like, And then I think Parable of the Sower right now is also a great time to be reading that. Yeah, maybe also just some art books, just picture books, photography, just kind of just dive on out and just when thinking about creative stimulus, definitely that. Braiding Sweetgrass, I would also say, is a really good book that people should be thinking about and reading. And I would also be remiss if I weren't to plug The Next American Revolution by Grace Lee Boggs.
That's on my Kindle. I would add to any kind of gardening if you've never done urban gardening before.
Yeah.
Up immediately how to seed save. Start doing that with in your kitchen right now.
Yeah.
Start really learning how to till the land and appreciate the land that you are inhabiting right now. And I will link those wonderful tools in the description box. And also, if you could plug again where we could find either your information or anything about the virtual tip jar. I'll also link that below, but just verbally so people can hear.
Definitely. So you can go to the link. It's tiny.cc/G, capital S, capital O, capital M for mutual, and then A for aid. And if you want to give to a larger pool as opposed to individuals, which then will guarantee that everyone will get funds, you can CashApp GSO Mutual Aid, or through PayPal. You can put, it's GSOMutualAid@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on here with me today and talking about building a new world together.
It's happening. It's happening.
We're doing it. The time is Thank you, Alyzza.
Thank you, Jen.